So where were we before I was so rudely interrupted?
Nested routes with subscriptions and users.
The question was if we want to create a subscription from that checkpoint challenge, like what's the best route? There's several different answers to this that are like equally okay. Ultimately, the thing you're doing is you're creating, God damn it, creating a new subscription, right? There we go. And creating here is the keyword, right? So if we're creating something, we're going to be posting into a resource. We could do this under a post slash channels slash subscriptions, right? Or what is this, like slash ID, something along those lines. There we go. We could do something like that. Probably makes more sense though, since the user is the primary thing which is being consumed here, to nest it under a post to users slash ID slash subscriptions. You could also post to subscriptions straight up. You know what I mean? Right, and not nest it under, because like a subscription is a join table between these two routes. So you start asking yourself, well, where do I put this route? Does it belong more to the user or more to the channel? Right, like, really neither one. So a non-nested just post to subscriptions would also be legit.
So it's definitely a post and not a post.
It is definitively a post, yes, because you are creating a new thing. Okay. That answers that. Great. Let's see what we got here. Come on, internet. You can. Oh my God, really? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Okay, so. Oh, right. As it turns out, apparently this application has been like a sandbox of sorts for me over the last few days. So I've just been like, whenever people ask me something, I've just been randomly throwing code into it. So sorry. So like the login form, if we want to AJAX this login form, right? So first off, before we get started on that, who all have you been over to this thing that I referenced you to the other day, the jQuery intro in my GitHub? Right, it's got a section on AJAX down here, this like pretty picture that describes the process to us. Yay. And then like some numbered steps that describe the process to us and like how we do the different things and where they occur. Okay. And then a bunch of code here in the JavaScript folder, probably in this section called AJAX, that like demonstrates implementing different sort of handlers with AJAX. Yay. Okay, great. So let's see, over here, I inspected this login button. It's got a href login. So first thing I'm going to do is find it. I think it's this one. Okay, cool. And I'm going to attach something to it so that I can hook up with it. I could use an ID or a class. Given that there's only going to be one login button on the page, I could probably go with an ID. This is a point that I'd like to make to all of you. You can only have one ID per page, or you should only have one ID per page. I saw several folks on the checkpoint challenge from Friday like making like a partial to like build out their horse and things of that nature, and then like giving it some ID as an attribute. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So like it's essentially like you're iterating over a list, and for each item in the list, you're like placing some ID, like horse name, into what's built out for that item, and then that's what you're appending to the page. When you have multiple IDs on the page, jQuery, JavaScript, whatever, however you're interacting with the DOM, it's always going to see the first one. And as soon as it finds the very first thing with the ID of like horse name, right, it stops. It doesn't give a shit if you have 37 other horse name IDs on the page. It sees the very first one, it stops. So IDs are really something you only want to use when they occur in a singular context within the page. If you're going to have multiples of a thing, use a class, right? So here I'll set ID to login link. So let's fire up our JavaScript land. Let's make a function. We're going to call this login listener. And so we make the function var login listener equals function, which takes no inputs and does some stuff. So in here we're going to say jQuery ID login button on click, runs a function, and that function will console log where we're at.
Did you call it login link? Not login button.
I sure did. Thanks. Oh my god, fuck you so much. Package, remove, package. It's the last straw, JSLint. I'm all done with you. Has anyone encountered this?
Caden did.
Yeah, I did as well. It's a big pain in the ass. I can't figure out how to turn it off, and I like searched the internet, and the internet couldn't tell me how to turn it off, probably because I wasn't asking the right thing. So this listener takes an event, right? The callback function, which is fired when this listener is triggered, takes an event, and that input is the event which occurred on the DOM. We all clear on that?
Yeah.
Great, awesome. So we event dot prevent default to cancel the default action of this thing. And because I have not yet confirmed that like things are working out, like, okay, let's try it now. Things are working out, yay! I don't know about you, but when I'm building things, right, like I write some stuff, I test some stuff, write some stuff, test some stuff. I want to see things happen continually to like reassure me that like shit is actually working out. And then once I know that, I'll usually comment it out and move along. Okay, so I hit the login button. Here we go. Here we go. Is this big enough for everyone?
That's good.
Great. I hit the login button. Oh no. And it's very not happy with me. So clearly that didn't work out. Oh, because I'm still calling it login button, right? Okay. Okay, so the listener worked, it didn't do the thing. So now we've established a valid listener, right? This is all basic stuff. You're okay with this, right? What's that? All right, let's make an AJAX request here really quickly to go off and get this information from the server, and then we'll append it to the page and we can start talking about like delegated events. So AJAX URL in this case is going to be, let's see, let's go, there's a login controller in this application with a get to login. So we'll use that even though it's totes non-restful. Is everyone okay with the non-restfulness of it? So the URL goes to /login, and the type is a get.
So now
Yeah, huh?
Can you just do it for us? Can we set the URL to, what it is?
Can I just do it for you? I've never wanted to smash you in the head with my fucking laptop more in my entire life, Dave, and I like you.
I don't know. I mean, if it changes.
I feel like you're trying to phrase a question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Isn't it shit to hard code the URL in?
Oh, yeah, it is kind of shit to hard code the URL in, isn't it? Actually, not really. Yeah, and it all depends on the use case. For sure, like in the vein of making our apps more modular and making our code more reusable, super definitively, yes, it is better to make the routing here within the AJAX call dynamic. That said, if you have a listener that is always forever going to go to the same place, then
So
it's always forever going to go to this.
never gonna change.
Login's never going to change until like some young spriteful developer like comes in down the road and says, boy, this /login isn't really RESTful. Perhaps we should like reconfigure the website to like accept login parameters at /sessions/new, right? But he forgot to check like the AJAX calls and like only rewrote the like standard request response code on the page, and now everything's broken. So yeah, maybe you're right. Okay, cool. So let's make it dynamic. Var, what is this? This is like link URL equals something. What are we gonna need? We're gonna need var link method. Yeah, equals also something. And then my process is that I like console log out those things. God damn it, menthol method. There we go. So let's see. We could say like a var link target equals dollar this. And then here we could say link target and just consume that variable. Let's go out to the DOM. I'll reinspect this thing. And we'll see. It's just add or href, right? Yeah, it doesn't have to go anywhere. Data adder href, so quick and easy here. And then the method, well, it's an href, so it's always going to be a get. There's really nothing we can like get to make that dynamic. It's an anchor tag. Anchor tags are always going to be gets. So we'll just define it here. Does this satisfy your craving and insatiable desire for more and more dynamic content? I'm glad I could help, Dave. Yeah, you're welcome.
Good job, Dave. Good job,
Still
Dave.
not RESTful?
Yeah, but I think he's not going to mess with that.
I am not going to mess with the non-restfulness of it right now because like we're tackling priority-based needs this morning, not all the things. The fact that you recognize that it's not restful and that you're looking at me like, listen, dude, maybe it should be restful, right? Kudos. Okay, let's see. So we made the request here, and then we just need to finish up request.done. Takes a callback function. That callback function receives some response data as its first argument. So we'll call it response data. And we'll console log said response data. We'll duplicate this function and make our .fail. But we're just going to change this to an alert. Okay, great.
Where's the alert down low? I didn't know there was a
Oh no, there's totally not.
alert.
It's just
Oh,
alert.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So refresh. Now we log in. Get login, and okay, we got an alert. So clearly things failed.
Gotta put in partial.
It says here 500 internal server error. Where do I go to look for 500 internal server errors? This doesn't help me like literally at all, right? So I need to be able to look at this error. Where do I find it?
Controller.
No.
In the terminal. Oh my God. Right? The server is running at a place. That server displays errors and output at a place. That place is the terminal. Yeah? So JavaScript displays errors here in the console. Ruby displays errors here in the server that's running. Yeah? So it says no such file or directory. Users apprentice A, wolves, crest, app views, login.haml. Okay, so I fucked it up. If we go to views, yeah, there is definitively. Where is this happening? Oh my God, too many tabs. Close them, kill them. You stay. You go away. No, I said. Okay, so this was what, login? Yeah, let's turn this off, turn this on. Haml, in case you're wondering, is just another templating language. It's exactly the same as ERB, except that it's white space sensitive and doesn't have closing tags. You learn about it in phase 3. Okay, so that should fix that. Just like turn it back on to the legit code that's there. Hit it again. Now what do we get back? Yeah, the whole page. So our AJAX route is functioning. Now it's time to go and like take care of the Ruby server-side code, right? Like we've established now that that when we click the button, that it's preventing the default application's behavior, that it's like acquiring the variables that it needs from the page, that it's making a valid call to the route which we want it to go to, and that route is returning to us some HTML. It's the wrong HTML, so like now our responsibility shifts from JavaScript land to Ruby land, right? It's time to go over to the server. It's time to like get into that thing and say, hey, listen, server, I know that you like had really good intentions with that. That sounded great, but you know, I need you to do something differently for this type of request, right? So if request.xhr. Oh, okay. No, not that at all. Request.xhr. You know, snippets can be so nice and yet not at all. We're essentially doing the same thing here and here. Just this one, we're turning the layout off. Right? Like that's loose, flosse. That's the only difference here. We don't need to generate another partial, right? Like, kudos to those of you that like went that route and said, okay, I'll make another partial, and then I'll make another partial, I'll make another partial. I'll have like this partial that feeds into that partial that like uses this other partial, but like sometimes it has this other partial that comes in just to like take care of some stuff. Don't overdo it. I recognize it's shiny and new and it looks like a lot of fun, but like definitively situationally dependent. Use things where you need them, right? Like, furthermore, do you mind if I like do this for a second? Okay, great. What is it you're learning here at Dev Bootcamp? That's a big part of it. Specifically in phase 1, you're doing a lot of learning how to learn. Yeah. What else?
We're learning by actually doing something rather than just sitting down all day and listening to a lecture.
Mm-hmm.
So we're applied learning.
But like actual tangibles. What are you getting out of like every day?
Learning how to go through a program and put pieces where they should go. Developing an application, web application.
Yeah, okay, sure. All those are correct answers. I'm just gonna lean into it for the sake of time. The thing which you were acquiring each and every day here, whether like it comes from me or another staff or mentor or from each other, right? Like however it seems to come your way, right? Like you're essentially, when you boil it all down, you're getting two things, right? That is a conceptual understanding of logic and concepts, right? And then syntactical understanding of how to implement those concepts, right? That's definitively happening, both of those things. There's a third piece of the puzzle that you're just like scratching the surface of, and that's judgment. Programming is all about concepts, syntax, and judgment, right? So many of the questions, like when you hear me say definitively situationally dependent, that is like a synonym for judgment. You know what I mean? Like it's 100% like the case that there's so many different options out there in the world, and you have to exercise your own best judgment as to which one of those options to implement. And unfortunately, that's not something you can come to a boot camp and learn. Doesn't matter what boot camp. You can't really learn judgment. The only way to get that is trial and error and years of experience. And it's something that you'll be building on for years to come. So like the concepts is something that you can get, right? Like I see how this thing hooks up with that thing and how they work to like produce this positive result. Syntax is something that you can learn, or you can look up, or you can like develop muscle memory around, whatever, right? But judgment is something that has to be earned. It's a progressive battle. That's why like I'm usually so triggered by students that are like in phase 1 and they're like, tell me all the best practices. I want to know the best way to do all the things. Well, yeah, I realize that I wrote the code and it works and it passes all the tests and it's fairly clean and modular, but can you just like tell me really quick, like what's the best, most professional industry approved way to do it? Like fuck. Just had like a little mini aneurysm thing, because like there's no answer to that at all, ever, right? Like it's the way that works best for you and your team. Definitively situationally dependent judgment. Okay, great. So we were saying we're just going to yield out this ERB here. We're just going to turn the layout off. We don't need another partial for it. The page that we already have does absolutely everything that we need it to do. We just don't need the extra information. We're just going to send this bit back, and then our JavaScript can append that bit to the page without having to do any more real work. No mess, no fuss. So this is a very easy pattern to follow, right? Because like we're literally just appending the little bit here to the end, and that's that. Yeah. I mean, in this case, you could even like break down the structure of this to make it like way cleaner. Right? Something like this works as well. Okay, let's try it again. No need to refresh the page here. Why not? Bonus question. I'm not going to refresh the page. I'm going to click the login button, and shit's going to be different. Why? Seriously?
Because it's making.
Oh, it's refresh.
It's only the controller that you edited.
It's only the controller that I edited. Exactly. I need to refresh the page whenever I change content on the page or whenever I update the JavaScript or something along those lines. But in this case, the only code that I modified was the server code. And the server code is accessed as like a byproduct of the action which is being taken here in the DOM. So no need to refresh in this case, right? Because the server's being hit fresh. We do see that now the response is different. Instead of getting the whole page, right, like we just get the form that we were after. So we can go back to the code, go back to the app.js, and what do we want to do here in this .done method? We probably want to say like link target dot toggle, and then oh, I don't know. I want to append this form to the page. Oh no. Let's see. It's here. I'm gonna put this thing inside of a div so that I can like have something to hook up with, so I can like place it where I want to place it. So class equals login container. And since there's only one of them, In this case, I'll use an ID. What the hell am I doing? Oh my god, take like one day off, everything goes to shit. So here we'll say jQuery ID login container dot append response data. Did things work out? Yeah, sweet. Things totally worked out. So the button went away, and now this login form is here. All right. So let's move right along. Everyone's good so far? Anyone not good? Anyone questions of what we've done so far? We got the form from the server. We appended the form to the page. We got rid of the old button. Am I boring you? Yes.
I have a question on hide versus toggle. I had a situation last night when I was doing my passion project where if it refreshed, I ended up having to do, oh, got it.
Keep talking.
Oh, okay. I had a situation where if I you put in the wrong password and you have like an error set in so that it repeats it back to you and it reloads. Only hide would fix that, and toggle can't make it so that the login button would double AJAX every time. And only hide would fix it. So I had to remove toggle.
That seems strange. There's something going on under the hood where, and I'm just guessing here without seeing the code, but there's probably something going on under the hood where the DOM element is still active, and when you like try to access it, then the callback, like the event function, the event listener function, is firing twice. I'd be happy to take a look at it for you.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay, great. Not the question I thought it was going to be.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, so let's make another function here now called like login. We'll call this one login link listener, and this one will be login submit listener. I just like to be a little bit more specific, given that there's some ambiguity in the names. Var login submit listener equals function takes no input console.log in login submit listener event. Nope, getting ahead of myself. So jQuery, we need to hook up with what's here. We got this login button. We can inspect it. It's within a form with an action and a method. It's a button with a value of submit, but there's no like identifying anything that's here. So I'm going to modify the markup. We'll head on off to our login.erb, and this form will now get an ID of login form. Yeah? And again, like I'm just using the IDs because I know that there's only ever going to be one of these on the page. Anything that has a remote possibility of being multiplied, classes. Okay, sweet. So ID of login form. So let's go off over here. Now we could say this: login ID of login form dot on submit function, right? And run this callback function, which takes an event as its input and does the event.prevent default thing. This isn't going to work out though, right?
No, it wasn't there when the page loaded.
Yeah, and that's the whole moral of the story. See, it's still doing the thing. Right? Its default action was not prevented. It's still trying to do the thing that it wanted to do. So you were onto it, right? The problem is that this element was not on the page when the document was first loaded. So like the order of operations here is the document becomes ready. This function is evaluated and executed. This function is evaluated and executed nearly instantaneously. And the code within these is not waiting around for like something to happen. So this function is executed right when the page is first loaded, meaning that this line is executed right when the page is first loaded. So the page is like reaching out to the DOM and it's saying, hey DOM, tell me about everything you know with an ID of login-form. And the page like returns back an empty node list and says, here you go, here's the things that I know about. There's nothing. And then we like try to attach a listener to nothing, which doesn't work out. The answer to this is to like make your event listener bound to something which is on the page when it is first loaded. So event delegation refers to a process of using event propagation or bubbling to handle events at a higher level in the DOM than the element of which the event originated. It allows us to attach a single event listener for elements and they exist now or in the future. So in the example that I have here, I've made like some variable which is some static parent element. Does everyone understand what I mean when I say static parent element? Anyone need further explanation on this definition? Okay, preferably the closest static parent element, preferably, right? In a delegated event listener, you have like you place the listener on the static element. And then like you give it the event parameter, and then it has this additional option before the callback function. The additional option is some attribute from some dynamic class, right? Or it could be a class, could be an ID, could be a tag, right? Some other CSS selector that applies specifically to your dynamically generated content. What happens is when the page is first loaded, all this is loaded up, right? This part of the event listener is loaded into the memory of the DOM. And it's saying, okay, I'm listening for this static element to be clicked on. So every time now we click on that static element, it is attempting to run the rest of this code, right? It wants to run the callback function. The thing which makes it dynamic is that before it can execute the callback function, it checks at that time, so at the time of the event execution, it checks to see if that event corresponds with the secondary parameter that you've passed. That make sense? Right? So it's just a different way of writing the event handler that like gets rid of the bugginess of like being able to deal with things if they're not on the page at the time that the page was loaded. So in this case, right, like we'd remove the login form from here, and what's the closest parent element? Anyone?
That div that you made.
The div that I made, yes. Login container. Yeah. So ID login container is the static parent element, the closest static parent element that I'm going to hook up with. And I'll say on submit of anything with a login form ID. So let's try that. In login submit listener, no default action was taken. So now the listener is functioning properly.
So is submit called on the form itself and not the actual button?
I don't quite follow you.
Like we're targeting not the login button, but like the login form, right?
Let's take a look. So login hashtag login form. Come over here. Yeah, I'm targeting the login form itself. You're asking if I change this ID from the form down here to this input.
Yeah.
What happens?
Would it only work if you had it on collect and not submit?
Why is that?
I don't know.
Okay. Because inputs can't be submitted. Is why. Forms can be submitted. Inputs cannot be submitted. Inputs can only be clicked. Right? And because even though this input like is the submission value of said form, right? Like the actual act of hitting the button isn't submitting anything, right? Under the hood, right? Like when this is hit, right? Like there's an event which fires, which then submits this form, and that's where the submission is happening. So yeah, if you wanted to hook up with the button itself, you'd need to change it to a click. That said, I personally feel that the better pattern here is to hook up to the form. That way, furthermore, so like thinking about error cases, right? What if I didn't hit? If we set up the listener to be on click of login, right? What if I didn't hit login? What if I came here and I typed and I hit return when I was done?
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work, right? But it does work on the submit listener, right? Because it's just another way of submitting the form. Great. Better pattern achieved? Okay. So that's event delegated, God damn it, motherfucker, oh my god. That's delegated event handling. Questions about that? Yes.
Is there a way to JavaScript away so, sometimes in like the horses and some other exercises where you do have to do a click instead of submit? Maybe it wasn't the horses challenge, but then it does the AJAX call twice, like back to back from a double click. Is there a way to JavaScript that out where if there's a counter there to make it so that it can't double click ever again?
Like when your horses, when you were pending the
Yeah, the same thing happened on Passion Project where I would click, it would double click by accident and it would be two windows. Is there a way like to prevent that from ever happening?
So you're saying like you, the user, messed up and you, the user, like clicked the thing twice accidentally.
Yes. Because the user is the biggest thing.
Right. I mean, you could certainly write in some conditional logic. The thing we were talking about the other day with like the promises. You could like write in a promise that would stop the event from happening if the event has already been triggered, but before the event has completed its previous trigger. You know what I mean? So that's the logic behind it. The syntax we're not going to cover in Breakout. Okay. This is a bit more complicated than I'm willing to spend time on here today. But the logic behind it is essentially you can create a conditional around the fact that like an event has been triggered and things are happening. And if another event comes in before that first event has completed its run, then you just like stop that cold. You're like, whoa, hold on. Already doing shit. Cool? Okay, great. What else?
When is it necessary to pass hash with locals?
Okay. Let's say so how about users? This thing this would be like at user equals user dot find params ID, right? It'd be how this code was if it was legit. Let's go off to the show page. Whoa, is this right? Am I on the right one? Whoever's code this is, I'm sorry that I'm like displaying it to the whole world and like making snide comments. Hopefully you didn't like put your name anywhere or whatever. Doesn't matter. This code's like 2 weeks old. I'm sure you're vastly better at this point, right? Yeah. Also, you're not your code.
I'm glad.
You've heard this before, right? Like it's a thing we say here at Dev Boot Camp fairly often. Probably the most like cliche, catchy thing that we say is like embrace the confusion. You for sure heard that. But I think equally important is you are not your code. This like career path can be a bit daunting. And you should 100% be aware that here and elsewhere in life, like people are going to rip the fuck into your shit. And you're like, what the hell were you thinking? Why would you do it this way? You've got to be like emotionally and mentally prepared for that eventuality. And recognizing that you are not your code, right? It would be the same thing as like, okay, so I used to work at a printing company, right? And it would be like, say, if I was like making a book for a college, and like I was drilling some holes into the book so it could be put into a 3-ring binder, right? But I fucked up. I didn't measure twice. I only measured once, and when I drilled the holes, they were like not properly centered on the page. And like the middle hole now, every time you put a sheet of paper in, it like tears the paper a little bit because the hole wasn't properly aligned. Anybody ever been to college? You know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? Okay, hate that shit, right? Okay, so if I was my paper drilled product, bear with me, I would go home at night and I'd be like, I'm such a piece of shit. I'm really like totally unworthy. I can't believe that I fucked up that thing today with the drill at the place at that one time with that spot. What's wrong with me? What the hell? Why can't I get it together? I don't do that. I go home, I do adult type relaxing things, and I don't think about the hole that I drilled incorrectly into the piece of paper because it's not like all encompassing part of my life. You know what I mean? By the same token, right? Like just because you wrote some shitty fucked up module once upon a time that is now like causing problems in production and your like PM is like really upset with you, right? The PM is upset with the code. You know what I mean? And the code is not you. You are not the code. So like making that separation will provide you with a much better emotional space to do your job and to not like get bogged down in distress when people eventually definitively attack the shit out of your shit. Was that a coherent thought?
Yeah, it was good.
Great. Okay, partials. So here's a show page, and we'll say like we'll say that this has like for the purposes of demonstration, not that you would ever write this, we'll say that this like prints thing dot name or something along how about just thing straight up. Okay, we come back to this user's controller here. This ERB method compiles instance level variables into it. So if we, okay, you stay. Hey Todd. So we could totally be like user, at user dot name, assuming that's a thing. First underscore name. Okay, and let's check this out. Let's go to /users/1. See, okay, so I got the error I was expecting to get. Undefined local variable method thing. So it's telling me, hey, I don't know about this variable thing, right? Because it's a local variable, we don't have any way of passing it out, right? Like if I said here like thing equals thingybob Joe Crab Shack stuff, right? Refresh, so it's defined, but it never makes it out to the view, and it never makes it out to the view because this view method, the ERB, which is like taking this template, rendering to it all of our instance variables, and then returning some string, right? It doesn't see the local variable thing. Doesn't know about it, doesn't know what we're talking about it, an error ensues. So the locals hash is just a way for us to hand over local variables to the ERB partial or just ERB regular, whatever, that we're making, if it needs local variables, right? So in this case, we'd say thing corresponds to thing, right? Where the key in the locals hash is whatever it's going to be called on the other end, like within the view, and the value is whatever it is within the local scope, right? So if this was like a class variable, double at thing, right, then I would do it as such. Does this make sense? This would be this makes a lot more sense when you have something like this. So let's say here at thing correlates to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And out here, let's say each. Ha! That's great. So the snippet like actually defines the placeholder as things. So I will modify my code accordingly. At things.each do thing, right? And like maybe we have some partial template for how we want to format each of these things as we iterate over them. So we would say here ERB. So like let's say underscore thing partial layout false. You're doing layout false nearly 100% of the time whenever you're consuming a partial, right? Because the layout's already on the page, you don't need it again, right? And locals here is going to be a hash where thing, we'll wrap it in curlies even though it's not required. Thing corresponds to, no, it is required. Thing, totally is in this case, my bad. So let's make a partial view, new file, underscore thing partial dot erb. And here we're just gonna like PE inside of an H1. Fuck. Thing. Yeah, great. So we got this partial here. We need to send it the local variable. We don't have, it's not consuming an instance variable, right? This is a really good example of like when this would go down, because like we're iterating over, and when we iterate over something in the view, the block parameter is a locally scoped parameter, right? So if we wanted to iterate over a collection of things and display all the things using some partial, like this is the way we would go about it. We'd send them off to a partial. Now, if we didn't have the locals variable, like we could still construct the partial to be legit. We would just like in here, we'd have to be like at thing equals thing. That seems terrible. Like reassigning a variable to another variable the same name with a different scope within a scope, probably a sign that something has gone horribly wrong at some point. You know what I mean? Okay, questions about how this works, why it works, when you would use it, anything. Based on this response, I expect everyone to kick ass tomorrow.
Chicken ass.
So it has nothing
Mayhem
to do
will
with the
ensue.
AJAX.
No. So it's here's an important point. AJAX is just another way of initiating communications with the server, right? It's just like a different flavor of server communications. So AJAX gets us here to these routes, right? We've got these routes. The like standard HTML markup that we write could also get us to these routes. And then our routes are probably doing something based on the type of request that they receive. But the Ruby code, right, like it needs to do whatever it needs to do regardless of how things are coming in. That's poorly said. Let's rephrase. Let's say, we talked about the like if request.xhr, right? Yeah. I'm gonna unformat this. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we take some small steps around conditionals here, or using conditionals here, if the request is of a certain type, to like format it differently. But a lot of things that we're consuming, we'll consume them in whatever way works best for us, regardless of what type it is. So like in this, the thing with this partial and this show page out here, right? This show page is written this way regardless of whether it is consumed via a standard route or an AJAX route, right? Like it's still, this is the show page. right? So then this ERB down here is still consumed, regardless of what type of, what's rendering the page, right? And like the situation with this partial that we're consuming here is that the partial, regardless of request type, this partial has consumed some local variable. So regardless of how it got to this place, it's still, the partial will ultimately require a local variable, which then requires us to send the local variable's hash along with it. Doesn't matter how we got to this line of code on line 10, right? But it does matter that like we consume the line of code on line 10 properly and like give it the things that it needs and resolve its dependencies, for sure. Is that okay? Moving on. What's next? Louis.
Is there an easy way to change the AJAX response depending on what you get back? Like if someone's submitting a form and they like enter it wrong, like in the controller you can change what you're sending back as the response data, but then back in like the .done, like you're always just putting the response data in the same place. So how can you put it in a different place depending on what you got?
Hold on. Oh, sorry, Angelica. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go to DBC, CD, assessments, two-phase, wolves, AJAX, and let's crank this up. It's not going to work. It's going to fail. DE rake, DB create. Oh, it totally did do it. Whoops. Well, whatever. Again, this code belongs to someone, I'm not sure who. We have a lot of conversations here at DBC about implicit bias. We have a lot of conversations about, stuff like that. And I keep talking to other instructors and telling them, because like we had this whole like engineering empathy session about how to like remove bias from assessment code reviews. I was like, that's real fucking easy. You just don't know whose code you're reviewing, unless they like have some giant comment at the top, or they or like me. Okay, so like me, whenever I'm like doing stuff, you'd see like this giant block of comments up here, something like this, and then here it'd be like app.js boot coder. You know what I mean? So hard not to know. But all my code reviews, when I do them like, you see this down here? PR/1. So I get like the number of the pull request and that's it. I don't know whose code it is until like you actually show up in the room and we like start talking about it. So like when I'm murdering it in the face super hard, no bias. Okay. No, not that at all. Let's go back to here. Do it again. Okay. So here we go to add a horse for this one, and I submit the horse, and what happens? The whole page shows up again with some errors down here around the horse. So like what happened under the hood was the horse did not post. The post request did not complete successfully because there were errors. Certain fields can't be blank. And then apparently we, like whoever's code this is, did not handle that error case appropriately. And I would imagine that what happened under the hood was that it like redirected to the new horse form. That new horse form was populated with errors, and then the entirety of that thing was what was returned out. So the whole thing was then appended to the page because the AJAX also did not check for an error state. Is this the root of your question? Yes, this is the root of your question? Is this what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go take a look then. So horse submission listener, this seems like the thing. New horse form submit, prevent default, form target, form action method data request sends the URL, the type, and the data dot done. It goes to the list and appends the response. So that's really all that's happening. It gets some stuff back to the server. Doesn't give a shit what it got back from the server. Just like boom, on the page, stuff from the server, yay. So let's go take a look at the server, which will be under horse.rb. Here's our post to horses. So if the horse saves, if the request is the XHR, then go get out of our partials folder this horse list, no layout, with some local variables. Else, which is to say that the horse saved, but it is not an XHR request, redirect to the horse show. Else, down here, which is to say the horse did not save, and we don't give a shit what kind of request it is, redirect to horses new. And this is where the error occurs in this case, because we did not properly check for all the outcomes. So this else should have its own nested conditional, right? If request dot XHR else end. So if it's not an AJAX request, then we just continue doing what we were doing. If it is an AJAX request, maybe what?
Layout, or ERV with layout false.
Well, you just want to hand this thing? You just want to hand this thing back?
Yeah, there's a partial that horse list. No, maybe not.
I think this will work actually. As far as, so now we submit. Meh, not quite.
That's, I think, the problem I ran into when I had to hide that in order to stop it from doing that.
Uh-huh. So your original question, Louis, was what?
Like changing where you're gonna put the response depending on what the response is.
So you're talking about you got back a legit response and you want some conditional logic here within the dot done.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Okay, so if you sent back, so you could do some if, response, something here. You could check over it with some condition.
Could you do others like checking the length maybe?
Yeah, it's not really great in this case because you've got response is just going to be HTML. It's going to be a pain in the ass to parse over. The better way of going about it would be to take. It seems like you have very few options here, right?
There's no way to pass the variable from the controller to
Sure, as JSON. What variable do you want to pass?
just anything that would tell the AJAX.dump what kind of information it is.
Yeah, so okay, let's proceed with this example and then we'll dive into that a little bit more. So instead of this new form, maybe we could say at horse dot errors dot full messages dot to JSON. Response, oh, yeah, I guess I fucked it up, didn't I? Okay, new horse. Submit the new horse. We got back this array. So maybe I could say here, let's go off and let's say HTTP status dogs. Let's try to find status for shit did not work out. Forbidden, no. Payment required. Conflict could be one. Precondition failed. That sounds actually like the ticket. Precondition failed. 412. Okay, so we'll get set a status of 412 here, and we can hand these back. So then off in our application, let's console log arguments again. Everyone remember that in JavaScript we have access to this arguments keyword? which is essentially the same thing as peeing params in a Ruby controller. So let's refresh, hit the thing. Oh, hey, look at that. What happened?
You get an error status.
AJAX interprets the status code of 412 as an error state, right? Because it's not between 200 and 399. Anything above 399 is interpreted as an error. So what's it doing here besides displaying this thing to us in the console? Nothing's happening over here. What's happening is it's going to the .fail function, which we didn't write. So here's our arguments that we got back within the .fail function. It's an object. It's got some text that came back with it and a status code. So like here in the .fail, we could say, what is this? We could like take this object. We could say like var error state equals JSON.parse response, right? And then digging into this object a little bit, we could say if response dot status, no. Yeah, if error state dot status equals 412, then like take some action. And here we'd like for var I equals 0, I less than or equal to error state dot response text I plus equals 1. Do some stuff, and here we'll say like you know, console.log error state dot response text at the I index. Let's see if this works out. Oh no, definitively didn't.
Error state that response text is a number.
Error state dot, well, it's going now.
So that have to be double.
43, error state dot status.
In parentheses around that, yeah.
Thanks. Okay, add the horse. Hit the button. Unexpected token O in JSON at position. Oh my god, fuck off. I don't care. Object. So, what do I not need to? I think I don't need to parse this because it's already parsed into an object, right? Appears to be. So now I can take this error state and replace it with response all throughout. Add a horse. Add the horse. Object error precondition failed. But it also like didn't do the things that I wanted it to do. Response dot. Here, let's console down. Well, let's console log right here. Let's console log response dot status. Add a horse. Submit again. Status is 412. Right? Okay, sweet. So then this conditional should be working out. So let's like just move our console log down here, and now we'll test the assumption that this conditional is working out, right? Okay, so that conditional is working out because it was still displayed. Yay. Then we can like come down here because like clearly this is not working out then, right? So like maybe we should response text. Let's try that. Is everyone on board with me here? I'm like, this is your workflow when you're debugging, right? Maybe let's try this. Maybe let's try that. Let's console log this thing. What happens when we put it here? What happens when we put it there? Right? Like fully understanding all the things, where they're happening and when. Yes?
You're saying console, in here, you're saying I is less than response.response text, not response.response text outline.
Thanks, buddy. You are 100% correct. And actually, this is a terrible pattern here. You should totally like cut this out and do like var, you know. Why? Can anyone tell me why that this is a much better pattern? You all have brain pans? Shout it out.
It's more readable.
Meh, I don't, maybe.
You don't have to calculate it every time you check the value.
Boom. That is 100% correct. Way to go. If I had candy, I'd give you some. I have bacon. I'd give you some bacon. Meat candy, indeed. We used to have a vegetarian on staff that wore this like eat bacon, meat candy t-shirt all the time just to troll me, I think. Yeah, so if you assign the variable for your loop up here, then like you're only polling for that data once. And it's locked in, more importantly, right? If you assign the variable here, you're polling for it multiple times and it's dynamic. Which means that like if like you were iterating over some array and then you fucked with the contents of that array within the for loop, right? Then you know it's going to fuck with the amount of times that like this for loop executes, right? Probably leading to some unintended consequences. Whereas you declare it up here, it's always going to be like 5 or whatever. Okay, so trying again. Oh my God. Oh, it's so definitely working out. Okay, so apparently it took like every character of this and presumed that that was what needed to happen. And that's because this isn't an object here, right? It apparently it's a string that looks a lot like an array. Ugh. Oh my God.
Split it, comma.
Yeah, I mean, I could. That seems like a lot of work. I think probably what I'm going to do is go back to the drawing boards and like change the way that we were receiving response from the server. All right. So I've converted this over now to a hash with an errors attribute that then corresponds to this array. And let's see if now we're just gonna like take all this out and we're gonna come back to this again and if watching me flail around isn't the best use of your time, feel free to go. PS, and by the way. Okay, so the object we got back has this ready state response text. So response text is the thing which we can parse into errors. So we can say like var errors equals json.parse response. God, fuck off. Response text. And then let's console log that. Okay, so now I've got an actual object that has an actual attribute errors that corresponds to an actual array. Yeah? So just manipulating the data into sort of the way that I want it to be. Data in general is highly malleable. You can always fuck with it to like make it bend to your will, so to speak, right? It may be some extra work on your part, but like it's a give and a take, right? Like, do you want to do the extra work to like format the data the right way, or do I want to keep like going down whatever rabbit hole this business was, right? Until I've like split the string on its commas and then joined the string and then concat it and like place the comma back in and then console logged out the thing and then set the alert. No, fuck that. How about I just like go back to the source and I say, hey, you know what, data, you would work a lot better as an object, probably. So now we could say like maybe we could like here, let's turn our for loop back on. And let's change this to errors length is errors dot length for I in errors length I plus 1, and we'll say alert errors I. Name can't be blank. Age can't be blank. Breed can't be blank. This is undefined. This will definitively never ever get bad for the user. Yes?
Where are these error messages coming from? Did you write that array? Name can't be blank, age can't be blank.
Active Record wrote that array for us. 1 second, we'll get right to that. Before I move to that, however, who spotted the bug in the last workflow? Like within the last 30 seconds, there was a bug displayed to us on the page. What was it? Undefined? What the fuck is undefined? Right? And it's just an off by 1 error, which is the most common error in all of programming. That's because I set this less than or equal to errors, which is a very common misunderstanding. So now refreshing. Name can't be blank, age can't be blank, breed can't be blank, no undefined. Off by 1 error resolved. Your question was, where are the errors coming from? Let's follow it back. So now that we've like, does this satisfy your original question?
Yeah, so you can actually like do the same things in request fail as request done?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. The entire purpose of having a request fail is it, here as a teaching tool, we use it as a place to be like, you fucked up. But like in real life, you absolutely want to do some error handling. You want to be like, this thing that we got back, not okay, right? Like, let's do something to like inform the user or to make it okay for the user. Let's take some proactive action. You know what I mean? Yeah. So by all means, yeah, request.fail is a very important part of the code. Where the errors come from. So in Active Record, every Active Record object has an errors attribute. It gets it at instantiation. It's empty until such time as errors are generated. Errors are generated on Active Record objects when they are saved to the database and something goes wrong and they're not saved properly. So in this case, our horse model has validations for name, age, and breed to ensure that they are present. When we attempt to save the horse without these attributes, Active Record adds to our horse variable, or our horse object rather, into the errors collection. It adds a string that like, hey, the name has got to be there. It can't be blank. And then we can consume that. So like here, here we're saying we're returning a hash where errors is the key and the value is this array. horse.errors.full-messages. Horse.errors.full-messages returns an array of all the things. If we go out and we look at this horse's new page with the code that was provided to us in this challenge, we'll see that it's consuming the variable in a slightly different way. It's saying if @horse.errors.any, if there's literally anything subsequent to this errors attribute within the horse object, then run the subsequent code, right? It's got a section with a class of errors with an unordered list, and then iterating over @errors.full-messages because it understands that this is an array, so it's iterating over said array with each element being an individual error, and it's displaying said individual error, right? So that's where they're coming from. This is why this code, like this code right here, is an excellent candidate for like a partial, something that could be reused across your website. You could design it in such a way that it like operates agnostically of this variable up here, and then so maybe like instead of @horse.errors, you like usually I'd do something like this. If @errors, right? And I'd like declare a variable @errors in my controller, and that's why whenever I make some, this doesn't make sense here, but whatever. If I'm like, because Active Record always hands us back an array for our errors, right? @horse.errors.full-messages equals an array of strings. Even if there's only one string, it's still an array. So like if I was like making my own errors, it would be an array with a string. It'd be like username, not legit, or something. And then that way I can consume it in the same way as I'm consuming my other errors. Does that make sense? Any further questions on it? You all good? How you doing? Just like in general. Okay? Had a nice weekend? A little warm? Nice nap this morning? You ready for tomorrow? All right. I like that big smile. It makes me happy. Okay, great. Moving on. What's next?
In the JSON.parse, where does parse come from? What does it do?
Here, line 43?
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris was asking about this morning. That's why I decided to like cover it this way, just so we could have some more exposure to it. Here's the thing. You know that you can set data type up here in your AJAX request, yes or no? So you can set data type up here in the AJAX request. You could say, for instance, up here, data type JSON, right? I personally don't care for this. Data type has a default selection of intelligent guess, which means that like it's going to try to figure it out. If you set data type to JSON here, then you're telling AJAX, hey, what I'm sending is going to be JSON and what I'm receiving is going to be JSON. So if you like send JSON but you receive XML, it's a fail, right? Because it didn't receive the thing it was actually expecting. The benefit, however, of passing data type JSON is if you know you're sending JSON and you know you're receiving JSON, it will go ahead and do this part for you, right? Like it will go ahead and parse the response, which is JSON, into a JavaScript object without you having to declare it automatically. I prefer the more long-winded approach because I feel like it gives me a better sense of ownership over what my code's doing and a better sense of control. So JSON.parse is part of the JavaScript library. So you have access to it. It's a constant method within the library that you can make use of. So JSON.parse, and then it takes as its argument some JSON, right? In this case, our JSON was nested within the response under response text. Yeah. So we navigate to wherever the JSON was, and we say JSON.parse all that JSON, and what we go from is this business here, whoops, here, right? Oh God. This thing here, right? Like this is JSON just as a string. So it's a JSON formatted string, but you know, as far as JavaScript cares at this point, it's just a string. It doesn't recognize that it's JSON. It doesn't know that these things can be made into objects. None of that. By passing it through to JSON.parse, by passing the string through, right, we create an object, which I'm not seeing here. Where'd it go? Damn it. There we go. Oh my God. Oh, such a bad decision. Okay. By passing this string to JSON.parse, it's converted into a JavaScript object, right? Actually, this is a terrible example. We need to remove this. And let's console or comment out the rest of this. Here we go. Okay, now let's try it. Because that was incorrect. Everybody follow along that it gave me back the internal array and not the JavaScript object itself. So for the sanctity of like educational purposes, JSON.parse, this is what it produces. Here's this JavaScript object, right, which I can click into. This object has one attribute, errors. And that errors attribute, that key rather, corresponds to an array. So now I could be like, you know, I could say on this object, I could assign it to a variable, and then on that variable, I could say like variable.errors, and it would give me back this array, right? We just like preempted that step up above because we knew that like ultimately the thing we really wanted was the array of strings. So we preempted that and skipped the object and just went straight to the object's guts via the errors lookup here. That make sense? Questions about that? Questions about when you use JSON.parse? When do you use JSON.parse? Okay. And it's not automatically converted into a JavaScript object, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there like a dot type or whatever in JavaScript that goes in Ruby?
The answer is yes. Oh man, I so miss the days. We used to be such assholes here. We've gotten so nice in like the last year and a half. It used to be that your phase guide was like littered with like links where it'd be like in the README of a challenge, it'd be like, and then you like parse the object into JSON. And there's like a little link. And you're like, sweet, I'm going to click on this link so I can learn how to do this. And when you click on the link, it would take me to like let right? It would like do a thing like this, you know? Good old days. Okay. Unavailable for legal reasons. That's too bad. What else you got? I get it. You'll all sit here literally all day and listen to me talk. Do you have some code? Uh-huh. And I'm not going to like write it from scratch.
Yeah. Well,
I don't got all day.
I can do it. No, sorry.
Okay, fair enough. So we're done here? Any other questions? Anything else you want to cover? Okay, great. Go have fun. Write some code. Enjoy yourselves. That kind of shit.